Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
Hello and welcome back to the Hack Your Happiness podcast. I'm Mercedes, one of your co-hosts, and I'm so excited that you're here with us today because, oh my goodness, we just had the most incredible conversation with Ruth Carter. She is one of the great minds behind some of the movies that we all absolutely love, like Wakanda and Wakanda Forever. She's the costume designer that truly brings these characters to life. And this is such an insightful conversation for anyone who loves movies, who loves fashion, who loves storytelling, who loves creativity, or if you need advice on how to work well with others, tap into your creativity, or make big life changes when you know you have to, but you just don't know how. I already have a list going in my head of people who I want to send this episode to once it's up, and I really think that you should, while you're ahead, before you even get into the episode, send this out to one or two people because you know what? Not only is it a great message and have so many incredible lessons and hacks in it, when you send someone a little message and you send them a link to a podcast, it shows that you are thinking about them, and that truly means the world to our family and to our friends. So do that today. Bring yourself and someone else a small bit of happiness. And now let's get into the episode. Today we are speaking with Ruth Carter.
Not everything needs to be collaborated on. There needs to be a direction. Someone has designated what we're doing, the road we're going down.
Ruth Carter! If somebody is going to collaborate with me, it got to be somebody that is worthy, legendary icon, and who else other than the Ruth E. Carter.
And the Oscar goes to Black Panther, Ruth Carter!
Ruth E. Carter,
Academy Award-winning costume designer
for Black Panther and Black Panther Wakanda Forever. She's made history.
Can you share one of your most memorable or craziest moments that you've had working on set?
Wow, there's a lot of those. Let's see. Let me just pick one. Well, in Black Panther.
So what are your top tips for collaboration?
Some people won't have ideas, but they will be a part of maybe implementing other people's ideas.
What's a lesson that you wished you had learned early on?
Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Hack Your Happiness is a podcast designed to bring you the behind the scenes of what brings iconic individuals happiness, plus their life hacks.
I'm Mercedes.
And I'm Anastasia.
Well, thank you. You are such an iconic costume designer, and we are huge fans of your work. You truly have a gift of conveying and bringing to life characters and storylines through your designs. So tell us a bit about yourself and your backstory. How did you get to where you are today?
Oh, I've always loved storytelling. You think about all of the books that you read as a kid, and you can imagine those characters, and they come to life in your mind. And I love the imagination part. So I grew up with two brothers who were artists, and I would look at the characters that they drew and the paintings that they did, and I really wanted to be like them. So I did a lot of sketching and drawing characters that, I wanted to create. And then I discovered in my bedroom, the desk that I was working on was actually a sewing machine that was inside of the desk. It had a big leaflet that came open, and inside you kind of rolled up this old-fashioned sewing machine. So I traded in my sketch pad and my pencils for the sewing, learning how to sew. And I kind of taught myself, in the drawers, there were those old Singer patterns, and it had these instructions that were really hard to decipher, but, you kind of took it step by step. And then, we had one of those attics where my mother threw nothing away. Everything went to the attic. And so I could go up there and find old dresses, old jeans, and I would do what a lot of people do today. I would repurpose stuff. So I would turn pants into long skirts. I remember one time I opened up a whole bunch of jeans and I made a blazer, patchwork blazer. I never wanted to wear any of the things that I made though, because it took so long to make them. By the time I was done, I was super done. And that actually kind of sparked a creative side in me that I didn't put like drawing characters and sewing clothes together as something until I got to college. And once I was in the university, I was auditioning for plays, and I didn't make a play. And the director, who was like our professor, he said, "We don't have anyone who can do the costumes." So I remembered the experiences that I had at home, like sewing. And I said, sure, I'll try it. It kind of was a consolation prize at the time. But quickly I learned that I could be all the characters because I was in charge of each one of the looks. So I enjoyed that even more than actually performing in the plays and being one character. And it took off from there.
I love that. I think that really shows that like rejection is redirection. Just because one thing doesn't work out doesn't mean that that's not going to put you on the path towards something else that is meant for you.
That's a great point.
You mentioned that as a college student, you studied education and then transferred programs. And many of teens want to change their mind on goals and career paths, but worry about what their family might think about this decision. How did your family take this change, and how did you manage it?
Yeah, it's funny. My mom was more open than I realized to me making these changes, but I was a kid that was always making changes. Me changing my major was nothing new. I changed high schools when I went to 10th grade. I didn't like the school I was in, and I wanted to be at a different school. And even before 10th grade, I went to another different school. My mom was like, oh, she was probably like, oh my God, this kid. But you really have to make the choices that work for you. Because as much as your parents like have a goal in mind for you, like they want you to be on a straight and narrow path, sometimes our paths are not straight. They're not narrow. They're wide and they're windy. And we have to like believe in ourselves. We're not making choices. We're making life choices. And this is your life. This is like what everything will kind of roll out to benefit you by you making these choices. So it can't be your parents' choice. As much as sometimes we want to please them and we want to stay in, certain programs that, they see us as being doctors and lawyers, or following in the footsteps of our family. Like if you have a family of police officers, or something. But you really do have to, dig down deep and say, where am I going to be happiest? Because if you're happy, you do a good job. And yeah, I would say that I made my choices because I was trying to do what made me happy. And I can't say that that's good advice. That's just the advice I took.
If you find that our interviews bring you a small bit of happiness, please support Anastasia and I by giving Hack Your Happiness a 5-star review. It literally takes 5 seconds. You just click the star button, maybe type a few small happy words, and leave the review. It really helps us grow our show, get more guests, and upgrade the production quality. So if you're able to take 5 seconds out of your days to spread some small bits of happiness to us and our whole community, we would really appreciate it.
Now let's get back to the episode.
I love that. And I
Yeah.
think that's important, especially for teens. Like I know Anastasia and I are obviously both in high school and kind of experiencing all of these emotions where you feel like you're sticking yourself into a box. Like if I choose to study, history, I'm going to have to work in that major and that degree. If I choose to study education, I'm going to be a teacher. If I choose to study science, I'm going to be a doctor or a scientist. But realizing that like you can not only change, but you can also be like extremely successful at whatever you decide to pursue as long as you are passionate about it, because truly like when we feel happy, every aspect of our lives, our efforts, our relationships, our work will improve. And that's why I think it truly is like something that we should not undermine.
Absolutely.
Before I made the change, I did the research. And that's important too. Like you can change and change and change and change and never find like the right fit. But before you change, do a little research. How long is it going to take for me to learn this particular thing? when I was in special education, I was a special education major. So I was in the classrooms right away. So I could see the type of children, that special needs children that I would be working with. So, the research is very important to you making those decisions.
Absolutely. You need to know kind of what you're getting yourself into before you kind of make
and I think that's important. Even if you're like going into, just graduating high school, what do I want to study post-secondary or do post-secondary? Like talk to people who are doing that, research it, watch things online, follow people who do that, like really immerse yourself. And so within the scope of being a costume designer, what do you think, Ruth, are some of the necessary skills to be a successful costume designer?
Well, you have to be a people person. I think the only way that you're going to be able to build characters if you know that this type of person likes to do this type of thing, or this particular career attracts this kind of person. And so being a people person, it doesn't mean that, you just love people. I just love people. It's not that. It's like, what are the different types of people, and how, some people aren't people persons. Like they look at the way they dress sometimes and they say, oh, I can be a fashion designer because I dress so well. Like they may not even say I dress well to themselves. They just might like the compliments they get from other people. That doesn't necessarily make you a successful costume designer or fashion designer. You have to actually think outside the box and be observant of what other people like and what makes their personalities come to life by what they wear. And when you start observing that, then you have lots of ideas to choose from. That's one. And the other thing is to really understand that it's an art form, that you have to know color theory. You have to really study the arts, take an art class, take an art history class. Really, it's an art form. And there are certain parameters when you study film versus theater. And you can't be one way. If you want to do movies, you still can do theater. You still can do live shows or videos or all kinds of things. It's all costume design. So don't think one way about it, and be a people person.
I love this advice, and I think it's so important. You're right, because if you think about it, the costumes, what the characters wear, truly adds that extra layer of depth to the character. It brings you to that time period, maybe the emotions, maybe their social status. And so it's really important to be fully immersed. What people wear in daily life is a reflection of them and of so many different aspects of one. And so to be able to kind of create that within an artificial realm, be it on a stage or on a screen, is also takes just as much, if not more thought, because you can convey things through that messaging.
Absolutely, and totally. And starting your career off, did you ever have a mentor or someone that you really looked up to help you get your feet on the ground early on?
Yes. Oh my God. I had such great mentors. One of my mentors was my professor. Her name was Linda, and she became my friend and my mentor. And I was a senior in college. And when I took her classes, she also had us do art diaries, where if we had an idea, we had to, put things in the not only just write, we had to put images in there or tear sheets from magazines and sort of build this this book. And then we turned it in at the end of the class, and she loved my book, and I was so happy that she loved mine. I didn't think anything of it, but she got it and she wrote some notes in it. And, she was really very close to me as someone who believed in me. And when you have someone who believes in you, it really does help you see yourself as that thing that you want to become, that profession that you want to do. And I would say that Linda was my biggest mentor. And there was a point in time where I was going to just like leave just before my last semester in college. Can you believe I was going to just leave college with one semester left? And I went to her house to say goodbye to her. I was like, I'm done. I'm fed up. I'm leaving. And, I'm going to drive my little Volkswagen back home to Springfield, Mass. And she was like, what? No, you're not. So she really helped me through my last semester in college, and I graduated, and it really meant the world to me. And I would say she was my greatest mentor.
I love that.
That's such a heartfelt story, and I think you're so right. Like, when we have someone, be it a teacher, it doesn't even have to be like someone who is, someone that we've looked up to our whole lives. I think sometimes that's what we think of as a mentor, but like it could be a teacher, it could be a family friend, a coach, anyone. Someone that believes in you and like gives you some guidance and keeps you going, like they're there for you when you're not feeling it, I think is so essential.
And like keeps you grounded, like oftentimes we can feel like upset or, like you said, like not motivated and you felt like, it wasn't working out, but someone to keep you going and give you that extra dose of motivation.
Because even like, school, getting through school, navigating stressful times, like no matter what it is we're going through, whatever season of our life we're in, it's so important to have people there for us that we can trust and go to. And also I think it's important to be there for those people too, like if they're having an off day, being a support system, because it's like a give and take type of thing. And so I think that's
I think it's important to be seen. When you feel like you've been seen, you might be a quirky person, you might have some like issues, like deep set issues, and when someone can see you, it means the world.
Totally. And when you were early on in your career, still in university, what's a lesson that you wished you had learned early on during this period of time?
I think the biggest lesson that I wish that I had learned was that there is a curriculum, if you would. I ignored like the curriculum. I just wanted to be a costume designer, and I thought that if I only did that in college and I ignored all of my other studies, I could still graduate. But that wasn't the case. And my senior year, I was stressed out trying to get all those other courses I needed to get to graduate. And they had nothing to do with costume design, but I wasn't taking them. And it really stressed me out in my final year at school. And I wish that someone would have said, just get through the ugly stuff. Just get through it. You're gonna, have all your costumes. I was doing all the plays, and I really felt like I was a costume designer, but I wasn't graduating unless I had done those other courses. So I would say I wish someone would have told me about, follow like really to the letter. What's gonna get me out of school? What do I need to graduate from university, not just being in all the costume stuff, what's the other stuff? And I had a little bit of that because I was an education major, but I couldn't use once I changed over, I couldn't use all of it. I did a lot of special education courses that weren't the type of courses required to get a Bachelor of Arts degree. So I would say pay attention to the journey and don't just be tunnel vision. Pay attention to all of the outside things that actually do affect, you going straight in or going straight out. You have other things that are required of you. Unfortunately, as an adult, we have to do things that we don't necessarily want to do, but, because of systems in society, we have to get that biology class done, or we have to go to trigonometry, or and work with your counselors. Maybe they can help, chart a curriculum for you that feels a little bit better, but you're not going to get out scot-free. You're going to have to do some things you don't like.
Absolutely.
That is so relatable, I think, because even like for us, like we're doing a lot of business work for two teens. We have podcasts, we have products in our company, and so sometimes I go to biology class like you were saying, or I go to, I don't know, last semester it was math, and I'm like, I don't see how this applies, like I don't see how anatomy applies to what I'm working on. But it's like you need that to graduate, and it's just like looking further out and realizing like, okay, when you're in this class, don't think about all the stuff you've got going on in your business life. Think about, how do I study, how do I review this concept and this material, because at the end of the day, if you want to be credible, you need a degree, you need a diploma, you need to graduate, and that's important too. And so sometimes, like you said, it's not about those little details and those little inconveniences. It's about looking past that towards, but what will a college degree or a high school degree or XYZ bring me? And I want that.
Exactly.
That's the stepping stone. So we got to get into the stepping stones.
Exactly, that long-term kind of goal and vision.
And you'd be surprised how some of those extracurricular classes will actually make sense in your life later. Trust the journey.
Exactly, and sometimes it's even like the concept of like, okay, I don't like studying for biology, but when I'm, reviewing for a class I am interested in and like it applies to my interests, like I'm going to pull on that same study tactic or that same, means of communication.
Exactly.
And so find ways to make everything relate back to the end goal. And so your designs truly do an incredible job of captivating American Black history and integrating it within these fantastical stories like Wakanda and modern trends. So how have you balanced blending history and modern trends into your costumes?
Well, that's called an anachronism. There are always anachronisms in entertainment, like, because we have to appeal to our modern audience, even if we are doing something fantastical or historical or, completely made up. We want to relate to it in some kind of way. So what I usually do is I look for the kinds of inspirations in fashion. Some things are cyclical, they go around, they come around again, and they come around. So like it might be the 70s, and I like the way that the flare leg of the pants is. And then I look back at the 20s and I go, hey, there was a flare pant leg in the 1920s, and men wore them in the denim jeans. So I can bring that reality into my period piece because it was a reality, and people kind of like that silhouette today. So I'm always comparing past, present, future in all my work and seeing what are the kinds of things that carry through that are classics, or what are the kinds of trends that we think we made up for today, but they were really trends of yesterday. So how can I bring in, like, if people like the aviator jacket, maybe it's something that I can look and bring in a vintage and use vintage in a modern piece. So with Wakanda, it was no different. We really wanted to show Afrofuture, and we wanted to do it in a way that felt fresh. And so we wanted to retrain the eye to see beauty standards in different ways. So we went back into history. We look at tribal things, and we brought some of those ideas into Wakanda, which was future, and we modernized them. So you see some of the jewelry, so the neck rings, and we added pieces to them, or we see the beadwork that is traditional, but we put it on a warrior costume. All those things kind of blend the past with the future, and that's kind of what I like to do. I like to sort of slide the scale back and forth and compare all of the genres and all of the eras and see what kind of film we can make that will resonate with people. Maybe it's even the color palette. Bringing in a really vibrant color palette, which you rarely see being done. And how do I balance that color and make it very Wakandan? So those were some of the big broad strokes, that I use to bring in a future idea with some inspirations from the past.
I love that. I love how you bring back pieces that are found multiple times throughout history, because it's clear that it's something that people like, that is classic, like you mentioned. I think that's amazing, as well as how you tied for Wakanda those like tribal pieces. And it also shows like the incredible imagination that you have and how you're able to connect like the past with the present or future. I find that amazing.
Well, when you do your history, when you do the work and you do the research, all the ideas are laid out right in front of you. And it might seem like, whoa, wow, you have a big imagination, but I'm like, no, they did. They showed me what I could use, and then I used it. You know what I mean? And then as you develop, it becomes something else, but it was just inspired by the tribes.
It's such a beautiful way to keep, promoting and sharing these stories from the past, because obviously the clothes reflect, something of the past, whether it was tribal or ceremonial or, just a part of daily wear. It's such a beautiful way of just keeping that alive. And even like when you're innovating and changing it to fit Wakandan culture or whatever film you're working on, I think it's a beautiful way for us to think of history in a more modern perspective.
As well as I've heard so much about how different pieces of clothing can not only speak about the character that is wearing it, but also like the time period, the like economic status of the country that they're in.
Yeah.
Exactly. How do you incorporate that into your costumes?
Oh, I love incorporating all of that in the costumes. It makes everything so community as well as unique, as well as historic. So if you are a sharecropper and you're poor, like how do you find joy? Is it in that you have great patchwork on your clothes? Is it that, you found a cool pair of old spectator shoes that you wear? Like, so when the economics are low, you have to be more creative in the way that people find joy in dressing, because that's all that they have. And then when you go on the opposite side of the spectrum and you're doing somebody who's really affluent, you can actually like, oh, okay, what kind region are they from? What, how do they make their money? Are they Midwestern? Are they Northern? Are they Irish? Are they, American? What is it about them? And then you can bring in all of those higher end fabrics and jewelry and combine colors and really create a story. So that's really what makes a costume designer different from a fashion designer, because a costume designer has to use all of those elements in order to build character and build community. Community is also a part of this profession. When you see the background and you see how they are interacting with each other and what they have on, a costume designer has decided on those things.
Absolutely. I find that so fascinating and so amazing how you can weave so many different parts. Like you have to incorporate the character, but at the same time, like that community and what's happening around the character, which I think very significant.
It's incredible, yes. And so I imagine that, on a set, you collaborate with a lot of people, not only within your own department, but the directors, members of the cast, and so on. And so maybe on a smaller scale, teens are also developing this need and the skill of collaboration at work, school, in friendships and relationships. And collaborating can be a challenge because it involves bending to other people's ideas and their opinions, their own values. It also involves communicating our thoughts and balancing workloads at times. So what are your top tips for collaboration?
Yeah, not everything needs to be collaborated on. There needs to be a direction that you're going in. So collaboration doesn't mean everybody all come. It means that someone has designated what we're doing and the road we're going down. Then we take on the collaboration. So understand the journey, understand the end goal. So you can hear a lot of ideas, but if some of them don't make sense, you can throw them out. you can throw them out. You can take those that may seem weird and investigate them as long as they're getting you to the end goal. That is the key. Know the direction that the ideas are going in. Know what the end goal is. So once you, maybe if you're gathering the collaborators, you can base your choices on the end goal and the story or the expertise, if it's sports or if it's paintings, or you can collaborate with those who are also interested in that subject matter. If it's technology, you get the technology person there with you who can say, well, that's a dumb idea, or that's a great idea, or that technology is old. You need to really pattern your collaborators towards the project so that it's not so frustrating. And some people won't have ideas, but they will be a part of maybe implementing other people's ideas. Not everybody is outgoing and upfront and outspoken as a collaborator, but that doesn't mean that they won't contribute to the group. So people, you got to meet them where they are, but you also have to keep the project and the end goal in mind when you have collaborators.
Yes, that is so true. I think, we oftentimes think, collaboration is everybody gets a piece of the pie. We're all going to throw some ideas together and it'll come out as this beautiful mess. But in reality, it's about establishing the end goal and then getting people to help you, reach it, improve on it, but you have an end destination in mind. I think that's the most organized way to get to the end goal. Like, we don't need to do it all on our own.
And I also think that it's important, like you mentioned, to have a diverse group of people to help you, because if you have a bunch of people who are amazing at technology, well, if you're trying to get to an end goal that's not solely technology, it'll be very difficult if you only have a group of people who are experts at one certain topic. Yeah. So making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who maybe have a little bit of different strengths than you, so that way you can each add something towards and help push towards that end goal.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. No question about it.
And I think when you know clearly in your brain what the end goal is, be it, a school project or, reaching some goal or going on a trip, planning something, I think that makes it much easier to decide whether someone's being a beneficial collaborator. Like, are they pushing me towards the end goal, or are they slowing us down or distracting us? And then you can better kind of evaluate how much of a player or how beneficial.
Totally. Yeah. And on any work that we ever create, we're going to be experiencing feedback. And I know that critical feedback can be hard for anyone to receive because we don't really like hearing things we can change about our own work. And can you tell us about a time when you received feedback on a project and your advice for dealing with criticism like this?
Wow, that's a tough one because, sometimes criticism cuts you deep, and it's hard to get back on your feet again after you've been criticized, because you might have been having a little insecurity before that, and that person just tapped right into it and said something that you felt, oh man, yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm not great, or this is not great what I'm doing. You go back to that little birdie on your shoulder that's going to tell you something positive, and you're going to say, I'm going to stick with this. I may not feel good. I may not really think it's great, but I'm going to stick with it. And criticism, it can belong to the other person. If you can give yourself a mantra. Sometimes I give myself a mantra. When something negative happens, I say, you know what? I'm going to make it. And I might say I'm going to make it over and over again. Every day when I walk into that project, I might say, I'm going to make it. And just saying that over and over and over again in your head, it helps you. It's amazing how one little statement that you can say to yourself that's positive will push you. And then you get to the end and you actually use that mantra, and also you use that negativity that tried to come in to prove it wrong, and you stuck with it. So I would advise that if you feel affected by a negative comment, That even if you feel a little bit in yourself that it might be kind of true about you, you have to dispel it. And when you dispel it, you keep pushing. Sometimes it's the hardest thing to do, to push through a negative feeling, but a mantra will help you.
I love that, having something that can kind of ground us, as well as like an affirmation, which is so powerful, because it's like, at first when you start saying it, you're like, I don't really believe it. But eventually, once you say it enough, your brain will begin to believe it, because it doesn't know whether you mean it or not.
Yeah.
And I think it's so powerful, and it can really ground us when we're going through a moment like that, because it brings us back to how we were feeling before, and knowing that like we can do this, we can push through that.
Yes, exactly. And I love that. I love when I come up with a mantra sometimes, or affirmations. That was a good word too. It just pops in your head and you're like, oh, that's what I'm going to say to myself every day.
Invest in yourself and your sleep, or if you're looking for a gift for a teen in your life, this is a super awesome gift, because teens can be pretty hard to shop for. Sleep brings both Anastasia and I a small bit of happiness, and has so many happiness and wellness benefits linked to it. And that's why we are super thrilled to be partnering with Manta Sleep for today's podcast episode. First of all, check out, this is actually the world's comfiest 100% blackout sleep mask, coming in an adorable assortment of colors. This one is the sunrise pink, which it's so cute.
It's so pretty.
It matches our podcast
exactly.
set. And it is 100% blackout, so you can sleep in the car during those car road trips. You can sleep at night. You can sleep on the plane, anytime, anywhere, so you can get your rest. The Manta Sleep Mask also comes with an infinitely adjustable strap so that you can change it to fit very comfortably. It also doesn't put any pressure on your eyes or your eyelashes, which we love. And best of all, it's also super, super soft and breathable, so you don't sweat in it, which is amazing. So get yourself or the teen in your life a Manta Sleep Mask, linked in the show notes.
Now let's get back to the episode.
Exactly, and it's important to realize that sometimes criticism isn't personal. Maybe this person's having a bad day, maybe they just got bad criticism and now they're passing that negativity on, or maybe sometimes they're just giving you advice or an opinion on a project, not on you as a person. And I think sometimes we jump too quickly to personalizing that feedback or that criticism, and it hurts us deeper because of that. So it's really about realizing, okay, I believe in myself, and I'm not going to take this to heart. It's not about a reflection of me as a person.
What I like to keep in mind as kind of like a rule of thumb is, for example, someone maybe you don't like or respect that much criticizes you on something, and then you start taking it personally, you start taking it to heart, but realizing that if you wouldn't take advice from the same person, then don't take criticism from them, because if they're not someone you would want help from, why would you take a criticism from them?
Well, you guys have really great awareness. Hats off to you. Those are some really great points.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind. And so our entire world is, constantly evolving, especially right now. There's a lot of new technologies on the rise, very exciting. So how do you see your field changing, Ruth, with AI, 3D printing, and other?
I'm always trying to learn how to incorporate new technologies in my work. And Black Panther, we use 3D printing for clothing, and that hadn't been really done before. It had been done in fashion, but not in costume design. And then I was always there were things that I was most uncomfortable with, where I was looking for solutions. I was always trying to find a better way of working, maybe even a faster way of working, because the industry changes with their timelines, and there's less time, less money to do things. And so I use AI quite a bit just to get my ideas out. I use all of the programs, the DALL-E, Image Pro, Midjourney. I'm in all of those engines, because when I'm able to get the ideas out of my head in a way that I like, I can move on to other ideas. I feel like sometimes we have a database that gets, filled up, and we need to actually visualize them and put them away in a file on our computer so we can move on. And it's a really good feeling to be able to put an idea down and move on to other ideas and go back to it, or share it. It's ready to be shared with someone, just as far as conversations about the project are. And then you can take it to the next phase after that conversation. You don't have to go back to AI. You can go back to traditional practices like hand drawings, illustrations. But if you go sometimes the other way without using AI, you spend a lot of time working through things you don't want, things that are not right, little things that you would have changed, or you may not even like it anymore, but because it's a hand drawing and it's a person involved, you can't necessarily redirect them. Maybe they don't have time to do the drawing anymore. Maybe they don't have the will to do it anymore. They don't like it. They don't like your idea. With AI, there's no personality there. You can say, do it again. You can say, I don't want that part. Take that off. You can mold and direct your idea till you get it right, and it's fast. So I've used that a lot in my work, and I see that there has always been some form of machine learning in cinema. And we have done it with crowds. We have done it with backgrounds. There's always been some kind of a technology involved. And now that the technology is expanding, we should use it in a positive way. And the positive way is, I think, not breaching on anybody else's work, not taking an idea as your own, trying to be as original as possible, but using it as a tool.
Absolutely. Like combining the two fields into making something a little bit easier for yourself, but at the same time, you're not stealing other people's ideas.
Exactly. Using it as a tool, like to enhance your productivity, to enhance, every aspect of brainstorming, creating the drawings. I think it's true, like even sometimes when I'm using, AI to brainstorm ideas or to come up with, posts to come up with and post on social media, like caption idea, hashtag ideas, all of that stuff, and realizing that I could spend 3 hours doing this research myself, or I could spend 20 minutes making a good prompt. And realistically, it's going to be the same outcome, but would I rather spend 3 hours or 20 minutes? It's kind of a no-brainer.
Sometimes I'm amazed. I'm like, oh, I'm done. I can go to bed.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's
need
good.
rest.
Yeah, and so I think it can be so daunting. I think a lot of people, even teens, it's like, wow, all of a sudden 2 years ago I had to do everything myself, and now I can have these resources to help me. I had this friend who created this incredible school presentation using AI to mold her images with the images she wanted to present as a supplement for her slideshow, and I was like, it's amazing because now it's a unique slideshow, and it conveys the messaging so much better, and it was a creative use of technology. And I just think that if we can use AI to really benefit our creativity, it can make us even more creative.
Totally.
I totally agree. And it is still yours. You've put the prompts in, you've made it, you've molded it, it's still yours.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And kind of stemming back to that creativity that we were just talking about, have you ever experienced a creative slump?
Oh yeah, I just think that creativity isn't just, don't take it for granted, that you can be tired. You can really need rest. You could really need a vacation. You could really need a walk. You could really need to get out and get some sun. There's a lot of other needs that go into what makes us creative. And they have nothing to do with being creative. It has to do with more rest and more life and more stimulation. You might need to go to the museum and take a look around. You might need to just go hang out with your friends and not think about anything. I feel like when I'm in those slumps, I just need to stop. I just need to regenerate, refresh, refuel. Just go listen to some jazz, go to a restaurant, meet your friends, just have a good time. Because also what stimulates, I think, ideas is the world we live in and the interactions we have within this world that we live in. So your environment plays into your ideas. So sometimes you might feel stale or tired or just can't think, and that means that you're sitting in the house too long. You need to get out. And, I shop a lot, and I think sometimes that, when we shop as costume designers and we're thinking up ideas, you don't know what trends have come into the stores. You might have to just go window shopping. You might just have to go look at things that you can't afford to buy, but the way the workmanship has been put into it, you can observe things and then go back and sit down and continue.
So that is so true, because I think a lot of times, there's so much research on how downtime and taking breaks actually makes us more productive. Even like physical rest makes you stronger in sports or in workouts. And so it's the same for our brains. And you're right,
Absolutely.
If we work so much, like sitting at our desk for 3 hours straight, I'm not going to stand up or leave my seat until I, create my perfect design or write the perfect essay or finish this project. We are not going to be any more creative or productive. And if we finish, it's just not going to be our best work.
Absolutely. And we're able to tap into that creativity in our brain a lot better when we're not sitting down forcing it to come out, to relax and take a bit of break.
Do things that bring you happiness, like all those things you mentioned, friends, restaurants, shopping, window shopping, sun. They're all things that bring us happiness. And when we are our fullest, happiest self, we can really pour that into our work and our interests.
Yeah, you guys have great awareness. I can't believe you. I can't believe you're in high school. This is crazy.
Thank you. We learn a lot from our podcast guests. So, Ruth, take us behind the scenes into your job. What is one of the most challenging costumes that you've had to design, and why?
Well, I think I'm challenged by Afrofuture, the Dora Milaje costume, the Jabari costumes. Those were, superhero costumes. They were made differently. They had different processes involved in making them. The Black Panther suit had a certain type of fabric that's printed. The way the fabric was printed was very new to me, and those became big challenges. And throughout my career, I've had a long career with a lot of different challenges along the way, and every film presents some kind of challenges, but I think the biggest one was the first Black Panther film, and the second one because we went into the Mayan culture and we had to study that and really use some of the elements of the Mayan culture to create this subculture that lived underwater. So even more challenging than Black Panther was how do clothes present themselves in water. So we were on land, we were underwater in a pool, a 20-foot tank. It was difficult, and there were times where I was just like, oh my God, what a disaster. But we all worked together as a team, and we all support each other as a team, and it's wonderful when the director of photography, says, well, I'm not going to see that much of this, so don't worry about it. It's going to be more silhouetted. Or when the prop guy says, here's something that could weigh that costume down so that the skirt doesn't just flop around, here's some weights, or things that we use as a team to acknowledge, anything. And so I would say the Black Panther and Black Panther Wakanda Forever with the Mayan culture, the Tolokanials is what we called it, was the subculture that lived under the water.
Amazing. I think it kind of goes back to that collaboration component. Like if you can rely on other people, different people's experiences, knowledge, expertise, that's what really makes for the best kind of collaboration format, because you're all working towards the end goal of conveying certain messaging through the costumes.
Yes.
So now, can you share one of your most memorable or craziest moments that you've had working on set for a film?
Wow, there's a lot of those. Let's see. Let me just pick one. In Black Panther, one of the Maasai warriors at the Warrior Falls, we made his big headdress, which they have fur all around it, but there's this beaded part that goes around the face. And I made that out of a Pier 1 Imports placemat. No one knows that. I just got a beaded placemat and I cut a hole in the middle, and and then I painted the beads different colors, and I made this Maasai warrior out of it. And then on Black Panther 1, I made the panther suit out of a fabric that was very thin, and the stunt guy on set kept blowing his pants. So I was like, this is embarrassing. Black Panther keeps blowing a big old hole in his pants, and we're on set, like our hearts beating, sewing it up so he can do take after take. And after a while, he had all of these areas that just ripped open. And I thought, oh, I'm never going to work again in this town. But we went to the Boston Ballet and we hired someone who knew how to put the gussets in so that the panther could make all of those like moves, those martial arts moves and stuff, and he wouldn't split his pants, basically.
Oh, that's so funny. Wow.
I love that. I find it so interesting how it's just all trial and error. Like, something will happen and you just need to find the solution for it. And in the end, it just helps you grow overall as a team and as a person.
Yeah, those are so funny because I think, we watch these incredible films on the big screen at home or at the theater, and we're like, wow, like it's so precise. And I love hearing these behind the scenes stories
Most
of
definitely.
like what you would never have expected, because it just like, I don't know, I love it.
We get little time, not enough time. There's never enough time. So you put prototypes out there, really. They're being tested right there on camera. So, you're standing there and you're like, whatever happens, happens.
I love that. That's awesome. And so, Ruth, what is a memory from your childhood that still shapes you today?
Oh, wow. I remember doing lots of creative things when I was a kid. And we had a book, I think it was called Highlights. And it would have all of these like things that you could do. Like you could make a towering tree in your room out of the way you roll newspapers and shred them. And I like made a huge like palm tree out of newspapers from this book I had called Highlights. And they taught you how to lay out the newspaper and what corner to start rolling it, and you had this long tube and you slit the palm leaves, and it was amazing. And I think that those experiences that I've had a lot of, making something out of nothing, is something that shapes my work today. Like I said, I made a Maasai warrior's headdress out of a Pier 1 Imports placemat. So it's not about like having, this, wealth of, expensive tools and materials. It really is about imagination. And some of the fun things that I did as a kid, I still think about doing today.
I love that. And I think that's like, it really shows how like when you do things as a child, it can really help you in your future as well when you're like working on that headdress.
Yeah. Making something out of nothing, that is so powerful.
I know.
Because I think we can all apply that to, whether it's art or whether it's, writing or whether it's anything at all. If you're starting with nothing, or maybe you don't have a lot of resources, or you don't have, a lot of knowledge, like you can still build on that.
Absolutely.
And play is so important, with the making a palm tree or everything. It's just like, just being creative.
Exactly. And going back to being a teenager, what is one piece of advice you would give your teenage self?
Don't worry about you when your hair's messed up. You still gotta face the people. You still gotta go out there. I was somebody who really, I don't know, like, peer pressure is one of those things that happens to everybody, no matter who you are. And I would like to tell my teenage self that, beauty's only skin deep. It's hard to imagine that when, everybody has the nicest things and you may have less than, or you may think you do and you're just doing fine. I would love to sort of give my teenage self a little bit of encouragement when it came to peer pressure, because, this too will pass. You will graduate and go on to a different school and never see some of them people again. So, clothes and hair and trends and popularity, it's okay. You're fine.
It never matters as much as we think it does in the
Exactly.
moment.
Yeah.
That's an important message, and I think, it's hard because sometimes I'm even at school and I'm like, I know that it's not important, what other people think of you, or, if sometimes you're dressed differently from your friends or whatever it is that you feel that you wish was different about you. But even if you know that in the back of your head, sometimes in the moment it's so difficult.
I know. Just sometimes you just got to give yourself a little bit of grace, saying, it's okay. In 5 years, I won't care.
That exactly.
And as a matter of fact, I finished my homework, so I got to go to class. Period.
Why are we here in the first place?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so something we love to ask as we wrap up, something we love to ask all of our guests is, what do you do every day, Ruth, that brings you a small bit of happiness?
Every day I try to get some sun. I think when the sun is shining on my face, when I'm breathing the air outside, I feel happier. And it doesn't matter if I'm already happy, I feel happier when I can just walk to the store and back. It gives me a little bit of joy, energy, promise for tomorrow. I never, even if it's a gloomy day, I kind of feel a rainy day is also kind of a blessing, and, the fresh air that it brings. And I try to find something every day that in nature that restores me. And I would say that would be an everyday practice.
I love that. I know that me and Mercedes both love getting the sun. It's been rainy for a little while here right now.
Are you in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, yes.
But it's okay. It's okay.
It's going to get warm soon, so we're looking.
Yeah, but I remember when I worked in Canada, it was important to go outside. It was important. Even when it was raining, I would get my umbrella and I would go out.
You got to do it. Where in Canada were you working?
Vancouver.
Oh, yeah, it's very rainy there.
It's not as rainy here, but it's still rainy.
Yeah, we're from Calgary, so we get actually quite a bit of sun, which is very, very nice.
As a final question, do you have one motivational quote that you love and remember, and if so, why?
Listen to your voice. No. Trust your voice. That's it. Trust your voice. It's you. And it's yours. It's uniquely yours. And that pertains to so many things. Telling your truth is super important. And you have to take the time out to really, be one with who you are, in a sense. But trust your voice. Sometimes people will sway you to believe certain things one way, or take your ideas and say, you should do it like this or you should do it like that, and then you kind of lose your way. So I think I like to say, and I even have it on a t-shirt, trust your voice.
I love that. I think that's so important because
Absolutely.
we can oftentimes, like we talked about earlier with like the peer pressure, we can kind of get scared that maybe our voice isn't right because it's not the same voice as other people's. But once we kind of can trust that and know that, we are our own individual, we don't need to be like other people, it makes it so much easier to make those decisions that can really benefit us.
Totally. And so, Ruth, if our listeners want to keep up and learn more about you, where would be the best place for them to go?
RuthEcarter.com. I have a website. And it shows you kind of some of the processes that I do. It shows you illustrations. It gives you a little bit about me, and I'm constantly, improving it and adding more. But I would say that's where you could go, or you could just go see one of my movies.
Amazing. Well, we'll have that linked in the show notes. Thank you so much. And thank you again for your time today and for sharing your incredible story with us and our listeners.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, and good luck to you girls.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and thank you so much to Ruth for joining us today.
What an incredible conversation. I mean, she has designed the costumes for some of the most popular movies. So Anastasia, what's your biggest takeaway from today?
I think my biggest takeaway is that having a mantra is so important. So it's like something to ground you when someone that, is telling you or criticism or putting you down. It's such a great way to remind yourself, even if you're just going through a tough time, about how you can be the best version of yourself. And the more you repeat it, the more your brain believes it. How about you?
100%. I think my biggest takeaway has got to be focusing on the end goal. Like, really focus on, what do I want to accomplish? Like, yes, I don't want to take this class, but it's going to help me get that degree, which is going to help me get that job that I want or help me have credibility for the future. Or, I don't want to collaborate with this person because maybe, I just want to be able to control all of the aspects. But by working alongside somebody else and getting their experiences and insights, I'm going to be able to make a better product that will succeed, and that's the end goal. So really focusing on that far out vision, not being tunnel vision.
That'll definitely help me during math.
If you enjoyed this podcast episode, we think you would love our interview with 4-time Oscar-winning producer and costume designer, Catherine Martin. Catherine has designed costumes for movies like Elvis, The Great Gatsby, Romeo and Juliet, and beyond, and she shares her tips for a happy lifestyle, balance, and confidence.
I felt that I have been consistent at a lot of things, of learning skills, and you kind of feel like, oh, this is just terrible. I'm just like a tortoise. I'm just going in a straight line. But then all of a sudden, you will have these kind of massive exponential growth in what you're able to do.
You can listen to Catherine's interview now. It's linked in the show notes.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, please leave us a 5-star review from wherever you're listening. It really helps us out and we really appreciate it.
Also, be sure to join the Happiness family. It's completely free, and that way you'll keep up with every single episode that we post. You can join by following Hack Your Happiness on whichever podcast listening platform you're on now. See you next time.